behavioural economics, encourage, is being used in policy to encourage people to do what they ought. And this is the key point, is what they ought is a very politicised idea about who decides what is ought. You see this kind of thinking very much embedded in policy. We also have it here in Australia. There is also a nudge unit in PM&C, Prime Minister and Cabinet in Canberra. But what I want to talk a bit more about today is because Australia's got a very special kind of behavioural policy making, and it's extremely punitive. And that's what I want to draw a bit of attention to and sort of speak a bit more about today. You have this kind of policy making where you have punitive style interventions on people's behaviour. So in the words of the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, he calls it tough love. He said that when he visited Ceduna just recently to spruik the Cashless Debit Card, which is one of the new policy interventions in this space. In a 3-month period, 52% of people put on this card ran out of money to buy food, 45% of people ran out to buy things that their children need, and 35% of people ran out to pay their bills. We also heard earlier today from colleagues from the ARC Centre of Excellence, the Life Course Centre, who examined the Northern Territory income management programs. They actually found a causation between the income management that was put on First Nations people across the Northern Territory and later some non-Indigenous people. They found a causation with the income management and negative impacts on children, which included a reduction in birth weight and school attendance. The other thing I want to say about these punitive social policies is that they are levelled primarily against First Nations people.
The introduction of the trial was rushed and this caused much hardship to the people impacted by the trial. It was announced in February 2016 to be rolled out in April 2016. It was only given us 2 months public lead time up to, the card coming out. It had affected a lot of people to the card prior to even understanding what it was about, and what it was for, and how does it work? When it did start, it was so frustrating because I was working at the point of time. It was so frustrating for a lot of people that their money was credited into the Inju account. They hadn't received their cards. So that caused a lot of issues. Domestic, continuous drinking, gambling. None of that has changed since the card has been brought out. To be honest with you, it's an insult to me. I worked all my life. And now I'm on this I will call it a white men's card. I've been asked the question why it's called a white men's card. I can't see any of our mob creating and inventing something like this. We know it's for everybody, all races, so what do you want to call it, creed? We know it's for everybody. Personally speaking, the majority of Indigenous people, the percentage is so high, I feel is targeted. Common knowledge, common sense.
And that really what the prime deficit people have is income, not a problem in managing that income. So just in terms of social policy, I always think it's worth reminding ourselves that it's never been just about the sort of benevolent state or progress. Social policy has been involved in lots of harmful things, particularly when the state got involved in the 20th century, as much as it's been in promoting social goods and public goods. So, it's certainly context of removing Indigenous children, institutionalising people with disabilities. Lots of this was informed by the science and the ideas, the values at the time, which were thought to be not only common sense but best practice. Before that, don't forget evidence-based policy. We talked a lot about that today in terms of that fad. I always wondered when that came into fashion, what were we doing before evidence-based policy, right? Was it rumour-based or gossip-based policy? Or did it feel it in your waters, like Kath and Kim might say? Of course it should be based on evidence, and we have had some very good examples where the evidence had led policy change. If you think about Australia's response to HIV and AIDS in the 80s, we really led the world in terms of thinking about what was the public health response to that crisis. But now we're not. We get the politics that trumps the data. We get the politics that leads the policy development. And all the good research that was talked about today really makes any dent on any of this policy. We're on this path-dependent road and we're going to continue down it. If we're worried about how people process information, which is what the nudge theorists are concerned about, that there's too much, we're not very good at it, we also don't do that very well when we're under stress, economic stress, the sorts of ways in which we've talked about people being fearful of what's going to happen to them when they're on their payments, where they're going to be lost, the intrusive state processes that people have to fulfil in terms of not just getting benefits but also contesting them. It's a full-time job. Their time is not their own, right? They've lost temporal autonomy in that sense. Money and time matter as much in this, but for people on income support payments, their time is not their own.
As I'm going to highlight, there is no evidence base for these policies. And indeed, unlike today at the workshop, we've heard that in fact lots and lots of research has highlighted this in Australia. I want to highlight that actually there's been basically no research in New Zealand, so we don't even know what the baseline for many of these behaviours that are supposed to be problematic. We don't even know if they're actually problems at all. Even though money management in New Zealand hasn't been explicitly racialised in the same way it has in Australia, in the sense that, of course, income management started as part of the Northern Territory intervention, surprise, surprise, it has the biggest impact upon Māori, our Indigenous peoples. So Māori make up 48% of the youth payment and youth parenting payment recipients, although Māori as a whole only make up about 15% of the population. Now, to be fair, it's a very young population, as is the Indigenous population here, but you're still looking about 20 to 25% of that kind of young population. So disproportionate impact upon Māori. Also a disproportionate impact upon women, because youth parent payment is mainly held by women. And so you're seeing quite a racialised and gendered aspect of this policy, which is absolutely ignored in policy documents. There's not even really any talk about that. So has it been successful? Because of course that's the whole idea of behavioural modification programs, is you're supposed to be able to go, aha, we've changed behaviours. Well, we can't tell because there was absolutely no baseline research done, so we don't know if actually budgeting was a problem amongst 16 to 17-year-olds. Absolutely no idea.